Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for SteelOrbis for this kind invitation. Actually, when my friend Venus was telling me that I'm invited for a presentation for Africa, it was with coincidence that I was supposed also to join the Egyptian Minister for Foreign Affairs for a trade mission in West Africa. We have visited like 5 countries in 5 days, so it was like, always we're leading to Africa. So we tried our help today to touch base on Africa. To be honest, the data is not easily accessible, let's say, but we have done our best. Hope to answer or to meet some of your expectations. So 1 minute about Marakby Steel. We are integrated steel producer. We are having electric arc furnace using mainly scrap, and we are having continuous casting machine and rolling mills. We are having German technology supplied by SMS. These are our key figures. We are #1 steel producer in Egypt with lowest carbon emission. We are #3 in terms of export share, #4 in terms of local market share. We are having like 18 billion Egyptian pound of revenues, 12 billions of investments, and we employ more than 1,500 human capital. We are having 230 local customers, and we are also registered in many projects with many vendors, and we are having like 170 international customers. Our products already reached like 36 countries, 11 countries within Africa itself. The majority was in the EU, was because of the quota, and US also, and Canada. Here we appear to be good spots, but now again with the Trump Section 232 and with the anti-dumping investigation and governmental subsidy investigation against Egypt, we are having doubts about US and Canada. Canada already is, we are under anti-dumping already. The sustainability, Alex was speaking also about the CBAM in the early morning, so we cannot miss this part, neither in our brief slides about Marakby, nor in our discussion about Africa. So we are having the lowest carbon emission, which is already verified either through World Steel Association methodology or through the EBD verification methodology by CARES. Our friends, our dear friends are here also. We are also used to report to the European Union because we are exporting like every quarter at least few containers or something. So every quarter we will export reporting. So you can see also the numbers are different because each methodology is different in terms of measurements and all. We are also having our Unilime company belong to the group, wherein we are also exporting a lot of lime and yellow lime. And I'm having my dear colleague, Dr. Munal Marakby. She's here. She's the Chief Supply Chain Officer, and she's taking care also of developing this business. Speaking about Africa, so Africa in general, it's being divided into like 5 main regions. So North, East, West, South, and Central of Africa. There are some for sure, economical indicators we will speak about quickly. So the GDP growth rate in Africa on average is 3.3%, projected to grow at 4%, which is a little bit better than the global average. Nevertheless, there are some countries who are lagging behind, some countries who are achieving like higher growth rate, let's say. But the issue is that according to the World Bank and the IMF and other global institutions, because of the underdevelopment of Africa, those institutions are suggesting that African countries should be growing at 7% or more. This is not so easy to be achieved with today's economy. We can see only Ethiopia, Niger, Rwanda, and Senegal are expected to have those high growth rates. The drivers for growth in Africa is typically reforms, a lot of needs for infrastructure, human capital, productivity, digital innovation, and tourism, which we will touch base upon also. But there are also like some challenges as well. So the high inflation, climate shocks disrupt agriculture output, debt stress, political instability, and resource dependency. We will see later during the presentation how the continent is really highly dependent on exporting raw materials or resources, which is not, let's say, so good for the economy growth. If we divide those into like different regions, we can see that East Africa is, is having like on average better than GDP growth rate compared with other regions, while we see that the South Africa region is the lowest. Here I leave you with those, like 3-4 slides. You can read them when we share the presentations. We tried to help you guys with having like each country GDP growth rate with the main, let's say, indicators for the growth. And we can see that in East Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania are leading in terms of GDP, while in terms of growth, Ethiopia again, Rwanda, and Djibouti, they are leading. For West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast are the largest GDP, while Senegal, Nigeria, and Benin are having the fastest growth of the GDP. Central Africa, we can see that Congo, Cameroon, Gabon, and Congo Republic are also the leading countries. In North Africa, Egypt for sure is the largest GDP, followed by Algeria, Morocco. But when it comes to the fastest GDP growth rate, we can see Libya, because for sure they are under a lot of reforms, Mauritania and Morocco. In the southern region, South Africa, Angola, and Zimbabwe, they are the biggest GDP, while the fastest growth go for Eswatini, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. So to sum up, for those economical indicators, the continent is really undergoing very high inflation. We can see the rate of inflation per each region. Apologize, maybe the format is not the best on the screen, but the inflation in Africa is really high, and for sure the interest rate as well is high to combat the inflation for sure. Exchange rate is rather another problem for many countries. You can see already countries are having thousands. So $1 is equal to thousands of the local currency. You can see this especially in West Africa. West Africa, you can see really like 22,000 equal to $1 in some of the countries. Debts as percentage of GDP is also high, but the good spot would be the FDI. FDI is going to the continent. We will have like a standalone slide. Purchase Manager Index also is not so bad. It's more or less going the same like global average. There are also good spots for the remittances inflows, especially in countries like in North Africa and also some in the west of Africa. This is the foreign direct investment visiting Africa, thanks to huge investments has taken place last year in Egypt. So we can see that the FDIs were like 6% out of the global total. Africa got them last year. On the Purchase Manager Index, as I said, there's no big difference from the global average, which is lying at 52.4. So we can see some regions are exceeding this number. Some regions are a little bit below, but more or less they are close to the global average. Tourism is rather a very big driver. We here bought a table for the countries wherein they are receiving the big number of tourists and also in terms of revenue. So Morocco is receiving the highest number of tourists at 17 million. Egypt is number 2 with 15.7 million. But Egypt is the largest country getting revenues from tourism at $15 billion, followed by Morocco, 11 billion. Tunisia also is doing great given their small population and their small area. South Africa and Kenya is on the 5th place. But that does not mean those are the only countries. There are too many countries that are having a lot of tourism potential in Africa. Logistics challenges is rather a big challenge in Africa. There are a lot of logged countries, We can see the entire Central Africa region is completely logged. We can also see that, there are issues with the roads, ports, railways. So it's a challenge, and it could be turned into an opportunity for a lot of infrastructure investments. This is the one of the logistics performance index. We can see only South Africa is heading with the rank of 19 out of 139, followed by Egypt 54, Botswana, but then most of the countries are going to 90s places or even, close to the end of the list. There are a lot of attempts within Africa for achieving integration, like what's happening in European Union, etc. Still not that developed, but there are a lot of agreements some people can benefit from for a while, like the COMESA, but then, again, some, strange policies could also hinder the usage of those agreements. There are also agreements with the globe, with Europe, with China, and a lot of interference by China in the continent, for sure. Now speaking about the more interesting part, which is the steel part, our part. We can see, we will start with some statistics about iron production and crude steel production. So in terms of direct reduced iron, the production last year was 16 million out of a capacity of 21 million, led by Egypt, Algeria, Libya, South Africa, and others. The iron making also in terms of pig iron or blast furnace, the continent is having a small share of the blast furnace, around 7 million or something, and the production was 3.7 million last year. Crude steel production is rather, a challenging one within the continent because the utilization percentage is one of the lowest globally. So Africa and South America, they share the lowest utilization, when it comes to the crude steel production. Below 30 million tons of production, and the capacity is more than 50 million tons. On the side tables, you will see, the continents with their production capacity, with their actual production utilization, as well as the countries within Africa that we were able to get the actual production as well as the capacity. Those are the long capacities as well. So the country, as we said, is having 15 million tons of crude steel, but when it comes to the finished products, the country is having 56 million tons. 50 million tons of longs, led by Egypt again, followed by Algeria, Ethiopia, and also there is the flat, capacity was around 50 million tons. There are upcoming capacities, but at least thanks God that the capacities in Africa would go for integration. So again, led by Egypt and Algeria, they are planning to put like more crude steel production. Thanks God, not rolling mills. So 13 million tons. Egypt and Algeria is having a plans of 3.7 million tons per each country. South Africa, 2.3 million tons. Then Libya, Namibia, and Nigeria. This basically for integration. On the long, as I said, there is like nothing, only 1 million ton, so it's not a big thing. On the consumption front, the continent is consuming around 38, 39 million tons, which is very, very low. We have a table later on that will show you that the consumption, when compared to the population, is really low. The consumption, again, is led by Egypt, Algeria, and South Africa. This interesting part for the different stakeholders who are here in the room. So we are having different groups here, producers, trading companies, suppliers, international traders. So the balance between the import and export is always very important and can lead to a lot of ideas and a lot of opportunities. We can see that, the continent seems to be more or less balanced. The trade balance, the deficit is not extremely big. So the continent is importing close to $700 billion, but exporting $611 billion. But the issue is that we can see most of the exports are raw materials or minerals, etc. So while the continent is exporting a lot of, let's say, value-added products. So for the exports and imports by country, and here we added everything. So let's say we also added the iron ore. So this is not only chapter 72, which is having like the scrap, ferroalloys, semi-finished, finished, but we also added the iron ore. So that's why South Africa is leading, because South Africa is exporting a lot of iron ore and ferroalloys as well. We can see the difference between the top exporting and top importing countries. But we can see always Egypt, South Africa, Algeria, they are more or less there in each of the statistics. The top countries exporting and importing by region. This also, I leave it for you when we share the presentations. You can see like top 5 countries from each region. Those also like the figures for the categories of the export and import, so the flat products, raw materials, long and semi-finished. We can see on one side the exports from, let's say, from Africa, and from the other side the imports. We can see the exports from Africa is mainly, as I said, raw materials. So out of $20 billion of exports, Africa is exporting close to $15 billion of raw materials. Typically, iron ore and ferroalloys, they are the dominant. And then, you know, the long and flat products, they are more or less around $2 billion. While when it comes to the imports, the flat is the largest imports commodity of the steel to Africa. That explains for sure Africa is using a lot of flat, a lot of corrugated sheets due to the nature of Africa and the nature of building within Africa, like building with, you know, flat steel, etc. And then followed by the raw materials, then the long products, and finally the semi-finished products. But total Africa is like $21 billion. When we try to move this into quantities, we realize that the exports are around 8 million tons of the semi-finished and finished products, while the imports are around 24 million tons. Here, this is also rather very interesting table that's showing, you know, the countries that are exporting to Africa. China, for sure, is in the top, followed by Turkey, Russia, then South Africa from within the continent, UK, Belgium, Japan, India. You will find different names because, as I said, this chapter is combining also the scrap. So for sure, UK is here because of the scrap, and South Africa because of mainly the raw materials. But countries who are mainly exporting semi-finished and finished are China, Turkey, Russia. The importers from Africa, again, we can see here China because of the ferroalloys. But if we exclude the raw materials, we can see US is on the top of the list because US is getting long products from both Egypt and Algeria. The US used to have. In the future, they will not have. Then followed by Turkey, Italy, because Turkey and Italy, they're getting a lot of flat from Africa. This is for the chapter of the iron ore. We can see also China is, you know, China, Japan, Korea, Germany. The top table is for the exports and imports per globe, but I'm more interested in the table in the bottom of the slide, wherein we can see the exports out of Africa for the iron ore, led by South Africa, Mauritania, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Mali. And the top importers of iron ore are Egypt, Algeria, Libya, Kenya, and Mozambique. The top countries producing iron, let's say. There is a big challenge within the intra-trade African. We can see that the intra-trade African part is not so big. So the country is exporting and importing big quantities, but when it comes to the intra-trade African, this is between 10 to 15% only out of the total. There's also very, very interesting and summarizing table wherein we can see the population per each of the big, let's say, 5 continents, and the GDP in trillions of dollars, and the steel consumption. Pity is the steel consumption in Africa is very low, but again, it's a room for improvement because the the steel consumption per capita is below 30 kilogram, 25 maybe, while the global average is 220. So Africa is 1/10 of the global average. We can see also that, you know, I put this because it's very interesting. China and Russia and Turkey exports to the globe. We can see that the share of those countries export to Africa is very big, very huge. Why? That's typically because of Alex's chart in the morning. Africa is not having huge or tight trade remedy measures so far. So the trade remedy measures in Africa is less. That's why, you know, China, Russia mainly, and maybe also Turkey is getting the benefit of exporting to Africa till now. You never know. So I have spoken about the trade remedy measures. So Egypt is surprised the globe, you know, maybe with a lot of trade remedy measures recently. But first of all, those were the trade remedy measures against Egypt. So because there were a lot of trade remedy measures against Egypt, Canada, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, on rebars, on wire rods, Turkey, you know, some safeguard on the wire rod, Thailand on HRC, and the European Union quota on all the products, and then followed by the European Union, again, anti-dumping on the HRC, 11.7%, UK quota, and then US with both Section 232 at 50% and the new investigation of anti-dumping and anti-governmental subsidy. In return, Egypt also reiterated, and then, there is like the safeguard on like most of the products. So already there was anti-dumping on rebars in place since 2016. And, it has been enrolled for another 5 years in the next year or the year after. And also now we are having the safeguard with, and you can see the percentage of the safeguard, but there is a minimum threshold. So if the percentage is not meeting the minimum threshold, the importer will pay the minimum. And the minimum is high. For the billet, for example, the minimum today is $96 per ton. The CBAM also is, again, a rather very important topic, and Africa also will be subject to a big hit because the steel exports out of Africa is 16%. So Africa might be subject to a hit from this CBAM mechanism. To conclude, I mean, we have spent, discussing, let's say, most of the interesting and important topics about the continent, high inflation, high interest, high debt, but still there are a lot of opportunities also, like infrastructure projects, a big population. Population is about to grow even or to double soon, maybe within 5-6 years. But I think the main issue for Africa is the financing and the logistics. They are both one of the two main issues. As well as I think also, from import and export perspective, the continent, as I said, exporting a lot of raw materials and minerals while importing a lot of flat. So that for sure suggests for a short term a big opportunity for exporting flat, and maybe later on another opportunity if people who would like to invest in having their plants or relocating their plants. We don't need new plants within Africa. So thank you, and this is some fancy pictures from Africa, from a group of my friends who were visiting Namibia. Thank you.